Hi, everyone. I am here today. I'm so excited to talk with you guys. I'm here with Sara Healey, one of our counselors, and we're going to be talking about teen dating violence. So, this February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, and we're kicking off a new program called Talk It Up Tuesdays, where we have a Facebook Live every Tuesday to talk with one of our staff, somebody in the community, volunteers, survivors, just about a topic that's important and maybe on people's minds. So before we get started, I'm going to share just a little bit of information about the turning point. Sure I am. So we at the turning point, here's our information. You can find us on Facebook at The Turning Point. And our crisis hotline number, we're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is 1-800-866-7273. And at The Turning Point, we serve survivors of sexual violence here in the North Texas region. We're based in Plano. Our mission is to provide counseling, education, and advocacy for those impacted by sexual violence. So I'll go ahead and get our conversation started with Sara. Sara, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here.
So I wondered if you could begin by telling us just a little bit about what teen dating violence is and why you think it's important that our community should be aware of it.
Yeah, definitely. So teen dating violence is just a form of intimate partner violence, or also referred to as domestic violence, that's perpetrated specifically towards teenagers, typically looking at ages 11 to 18. So that can include any type of physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional and verbal, mental abuse, manipulation, or stalking. And then it can occur in person as well as through technology. And then I think one of the main reasons it's important to talk about is because the term violence can kind of be deceiving, because we often equate that just with physical aggression. But a relationship can still be extremely abusive even without any type of physical contact. And then we get teenagers who don't know that they're in unhealthy situations, and that can lead to a lot of issues just with mental health, and then, furthering abusive cycles. So it's definitely important to be talking about. And then also just wanted to share that according to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1 in 10 people experience dating violence from the ages of 11 to 17. And then that number increases to 1 in 3 among 18 to 24-year-olds. So clearly it's a really prevalent problem in our country. And so definitely something that is important to talk about.
Great. Well, I'm so glad that you're here and you're so knowledgeable on the subject. So we get to hear what you have to say. One thing I did want to ask, so it says teen dating violence. So does that mean that the two individuals have to be like boyfriend and girlfriend or in a relationship? Or I just wonder, sometimes labels almost seem to exclude some of the different ways that relationships look. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Right, definitely. Yeah, so two people do not have to be in a specific labeled relationship for it to still be abusive or unhealthy. I think that's kind of just the best name that we have for it right now. But it falls under the category of intimate partner violence. So it really is just kind of any intimate relationship that turns into something unhealthy.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for clarifying that. So, when we talk about unhealthy relationships,
Mhm.
can you give some examples of how, like, what some of the signs might be that someone's in an unhealthy relationship?
Yeah, good question. So, controlling behaviors are a really big indicator of an unhealthy relationship. So, somebody kind of controlling who you talk to, what you do, how you spend your time. Excessive possessiveness or jealousy can be a big indicator. Anytime someone's insulting, demeaning, or shaming someone else, name calling, just really saying hurtful or threatening things can be a symptom of abuse. Someone who's intimidating their partner or threatening them with any type of either force, weapons, fear, anything like that. And then we have physical abuse. So kind of what we typically think of with like hitting, choking, punching, or using physical force to exert control. So dominance, like pinning someone against a wall, hair pulling, throwing things at someone else, or throwing things, even just, throwing a vase against the wall and breaking it, that can just exert control by making the other party fearful. And then we have like things like forcing someone or coercing someone to use drugs or alcohol without their consent, forcing or coercing or threatening the other party to perform sexual acts when they don't want to, any type of recording sexual acts without any consent, or threatening revenge porn is a really big thing that we see amongst teens, especially with social media. Someone who is tracking their partner's location, stalking them, like following them around, seeing where they're going, and then trying to exert control over where they're going, or kind of using that against them. Maybe logging into their social media accounts, forcing them to give any kind of account information. Can also look like if somebody's threatening suicide or blaming you for their own mental health problems, or saying, if you don't do this, then you don't love me. And if you don't love me, I'm going to hurt myself. Could be a big example. Gaslighting, that's kind of a big topic right now in the world. So that's when somebody's making you feel crazy or questioning your own reality, telling you that what your experiences are not valid. And then somebody who's blaming you for all their problems or all the problems in a relationship, and they're not willing to communicate or accept any responsibility. And I think something else that's just important to note with these signs is that these things happen often slowly, not just overnight. Like they don't come all at once. So it might just start out as a little bit of verbal abuse, somebody just saying hurtful things, and then over time can escalate to more and more, the more that it happens. And so they often intensify as the relationship grows. So it's not always easy to see at the beginning, and it can be easy to miss those signs. Or a lot of people will convince themselves like, oh, it's not that big of a deal that they're calling me names. It's whatever. But then it turns into more and more. And then it's also just important to remember that every single type of those abuse situations is serious and it's important, and no one deserves that kind of treatment in a relationship.
Oh, that's a great point. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because sometimes I think people can just blow it off like, oh, this is a small thing. It doesn't really matter, but
Right.
no one should, yeah, be forced to accept that kind of behavior. So that's an unhealthy relationship. There
Mhm.
was a lot of different
Yeah.
characteristics. I wonder if you can kind of contrast that with a healthy relationship. Like what would be a few signs of a really healthy relationship that wouldn't involve those activities?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the biggest things are just being able to have open communication, mutual trust and respect. So always respecting the other party, honoring one another, feeling like you can trust your partner and they trust you, supporting one another's decisions and goals, not knocking one another down or insulting them. Both parties continuing to maintain their own friendships and other relationships outside of the intimate relationship is a big indicator. It's good to have your own life outside of your partner and letting them, be a part of your life, but not becoming your whole life. Always having honesty and being truthful with one another, and then kind of a general feeling of safety in the relationship. So I also have some good questions you can ask yourself to kind of assess if you're in a healthy relationship. Would be like, do I feel loved and respected by my partner? And do I feel safe with them? Do I feel threatened by them in any way? And do they add to my life or take away from my life? I think is a big one.
Oh, those are great to have those questions to reflect on. So, what do you do if you're going through these questions right now and you're like, oh, I don't think that the person I'm with is adding to my life, and I don't feel all that safe when I'm around this individual? What advice would you give?
Yeah. So, it's good to be asking yourself those questions. And then if you feel like the relationship is really unhealthy or abusive, it's definitely important be able to make a safety plan to exit that relationship safely. If maybe you feel like it's not the healthiest thing, but it's not quite to the point of abuse, you can definitely have a conversation with your partner, try to set some boundaries and see if things are going to change, and checking that out over a period of time, not just, one day of changed behavior is important. But if it's not changing, or if those signs are pointing to something abusive, definitely try to get out of the relationship. Seeking support from trusted family or friends, if you don't feel like you have a healthy support system, look outside of just your circle. There's lots of organizations that offer support groups and things like that, advocates that can be helpful in walking you through that process. Looking into counseling to heal your hurts, and then also having that as support for learning how to plan to leave an unhealthy relationship, and then also pursuing legal action if it's necessary. So if there was any type of physical violence or sexual violence, or any stalking or revenge porn, anything like that, that can be grounds for legal action. So talking to the police or an advocacy center can be helpful, and documenting that abuse is going to be a big key there.
Great. Oh, there's a lot of different options out there, and some seem like they don't require a lot of effort, and some obviously, depending on the situation, require a lot more investment in that. But those are some great options. So I'm a mom. I've got a teenager, and luckily he's not quite at the stage of those close relationships like that. But so what do I do if I'm a parent and I'm concerned about my child, my teen, that, or even my young adult, that they might be in an unhealthy relationship, one that's escalating towards this sort of violence?
Yeah, definitely. So I think some common things to look for as a parent, if you want to evaluate if your teen's relationship is healthy or unhealthy, would be checking, if they have any unexplained bruising or injuries, kind of being able to see those physical effects, taking note of that, asking them about it. And then if they're changing, like using drugs and alcohol, and that's not something they would normally do, that's definitely something to kind of keep your guard up there, and be mindful of watching. Changes in their appetite or sleeping patterns can be an indicator. Changes in their friend group or their interest in doing extracurricular activities or things that they normally enjoyed, if they're not enjoying or not interested anymore, that could point to an issue. Withdrawing from family and friends is a really big one. If your teen is starting to really pull away from you, and especially their friends, definitely could be a sign that there might be something going on there. And then if they're making constant excuses for their partner's behavior, that's something to be mindful of as well. And so those things may not automatically point to abuse, but they're definitely things to note and keep an eye on, and just start those conversations with your teenager.
So how do you recommend starting those conversations? I know that sort of parental relationships during the teen years can be a time of fireworks. And I can imagine if you go in and start questioning a relationship, that can lead to a lot of conflict. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the biggest thing is having just an open line of communication, and that ideally would start long before they're in relationships and before they're a teenager. But just always trying to reassure your kids that they can talk to you about anything, and that you love them, you support them no matter what they've done, and that they're not going to be in trouble if they talk to you about something that they've done that they may label as bad, because you want to be able to be there to help them. And then not talking at them, but instead maybe asking them questions to foster conversations. So be curious about their feelings and their opinions. That's going to really help be able to have that open line of communication. And then I would say another thing is start before you think you need to. So talk to them proactively, ideally before they're dating, kind of being able to talk to them about, okay, what is abuse? What does that look like? What does a healthy relationship look like? And also a big thing is what their worth is, how they deserve to be treated, which is with dignity and respect. And then another key part of that I think is important to touch on is discuss how they should be treating others in a relationship. And, this doesn't just apply to dating relationships, but is obviously really prevalent there. But people often don't start out just trying to be abusive. It kind of escalates over time. And so helping your kids understand how to be a healthy partner is really going to help with eliminating teen dating violence if we're getting education from both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also just important to not ever think with the mindset of like, this won't ever happen to my kid, because it can happen to anybody. When you have that mindset, you might not be addressing things that maybe you should. Um, you want to model healthy relationships and boundaries. Kids are always watching and learning. So if they see you having healthy relationships, romantic or not, and being able to set boundaries with people, they're going to learn best that way. By seeing you do it in a healthy way, or talking to them about the ways that maybe you haven't done it in a healthy way in the past. Um, and then if you have concerns about their relationship specifically, I would say when you bring that up with them, state what you've observed and why you're concerned about it, but focus on the actions and what's going on, and not like attacking the person, not saying, who you're dating is unhealthy or bad, because that's immediately going to put them on the defense. Um, and then also important to let them know that abuse is never their fault, and that you love them and that you want to protect them and help them however you can. And then throughout the process, if they decide that they maybe need to leave an abusive relationship, helping them safety plan and guiding them through how to exit that in the best way, can be really a good thing to be a part of. And I think something important to note there is you want to let them kind of be in the driver's seat, and kind of, for the analogy, you act as the GPS. So you're wanting to inform them on their options and kind of the best route to take, whether that's counseling, legal action, just general safety planning, and be able to offer advice, but don't make decisions for them or take that control away, because that's something that they've probably been missing in an abusive relationship. They haven't had that autonomy. So giving them that and being able to make those choices is really a key thing there for kind of healing from that. And then just continue to have those conversations, offer support even after they've exited an unhealthy relationship.
Those are some fantastic tips. It makes me think I need to go start having more frequent conversations with my kids. But that was so helpful. So these are some great tips for parents. But what would you say to peers, to other friends that might see a friend in this sort of situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of it is pretty similar, but letting them know, your friends know that you're always there to support them and that you care about them. Letting them know your concerns about the relationship, again, in a really objective way. So talking about those specific actions and behaviors, not just your opinions about the person or the relationship. We want to make sure we're never blaming the person who is on the receiving end of abuse, because it's not their fault. And oftentimes as friends, we're seeing more than maybe a parent would see. So kind of keeping an eye out for those things and being able to bring those up with your friend in a really non-confrontational way can be helpful. Pointing them to helpful resources. Oftentimes teens are way more willing to listen to their friends than their parent. So we'll talk about some of those at the end, but there's several resources out there that you can kind of point your friends to get help if they need it. I think something else that's helpful to remember is that their abuser may be influencing them to kind of withdraw from the relationship. So I would say try not to take that personally, and instead just try to talk to them about it in a non-confrontational, objective way. So, something like, hey, I feel like we've been really distant lately. Like, is everything okay with you? Are you okay? Are we okay? Can kind of help start that conversation instead of coming from like an attacking point of view. And then if you're concerned about their safety, always talk with a trusted adult so that they can get them the appropriate help. Don't feel like you have to be their savior. And then again, after they leave the relationship, continue to check in with how they're feeling, reassure them that you want to support them, understand that they may go back to their abuser. On average, victims of domestic violence return to their abuser an average of 7 times. So that's not uncommon, unfortunately. So try not to be upset with your friend, but just continue supporting them, pointing them to the resources that can help. Because the worst thing that can really happen is if you are dogging on the person that they were in a relationship with, and then they go back and they feel like they can't trust you anymore. So they continue to date that person like in secrecy. That really just is going to perpetuate what was going on before. So I think that's an important thing to note.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So You've given us a lot of tips on how to recognize healthy behavior, healthy relationships, signs of unhealthy relationships as parents, as individuals, as friends, what we can do. What about just for everybody listening today or everybody who comes across this video? Do you have maybe just a couple action steps that each person can take that might help if somebody encounters this in the future or if they are dealing with this issue right now?
Yeah, definitely. So number one, just be having those conversations with people, talking with people about healthy versus unhealthy relationships and making sure we're all aware of that because oftentimes teens might not be, they might think something's normal, especially if they've never been in a relationship before that's actually unhealthy. So the more we're having those conversations, the more exposure we have. And then as far as if somebody is in an unhealthy relationship, the action steps can be first of all, exiting the relationship, getting yourself to safety is the number one priority. And then setting boundaries within your current relationships. And again, that's any type of relationship, not just romantic, but making sure you can try to set those up preemptively and ahead of time before you need them. Safety planning, which I have a good resource for that I can share in a minute, and then creating a healthy support system. So whether that's friends, family, community resources, but just people around you that are on your side and can help when you need it. And then legal action if needed. If that's something that you would like to do, you can even talk with law enforcement or an advocacy agency to see if legal options are something that would apply to your situation.
Right. I think the point that you made about healthy boundaries is something that everybody, regardless of the situation, walk of life, age, it's something to just take a moment to reflect on what are my boundaries and practice. I think even just getting in the habit of practicing that boundary setting can help as modeling for other people and just beginning to discuss it. So I'm so glad you brought up all of those different action steps. You mentioned you had a couple resources. Do you want to share what those are?
Yeah,
Or
sure. Yeah. So, number one, if you research any type of domestic violence or teen dating violence, the first thing that'll come up is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. They're an awesome resource because they have a calling or a texting hotline. They also have online chats where you can ask any questions. They can point you to more specific resources for your situation. Then they have, oh, go ahead.
hold on one second. I'm going to go ahead. I think I might have that actually on my PowerPoint. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that up on the screen as you continue
Perfect.
to um, tell us about the other resources that you have.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then the next one is called Love is Respect. And so they are specifically targeted towards teen dating violence. Again, they have online chat resources, lots of blog posts that have helpful information and can help you spot the signs or know what to do if you have a friend or if you're in an unhealthy relationship. There's another one called One Love. They teach specifically teens about healthy relationships. And so they have an app that's called My Plan. And so that is a safety planning app that has resources for specific situations that you might encounter. And that can really help you kind of get a safety plan all in one place, know what you need to do to exit a relationship safely. The Texas Advocacy Project I mentioned earlier, they offer free legal resources for anyone who has been a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault. So they can help with legal consultations, answering questions, helping you point you to the right resources or what you need to do if you decide to take legal action. And then the Turning Point is a great option as well. We have free counseling and a 24-hour hotline if you've experienced sexual assault. And then we also right now are running a few counseling groups. So we have one specifically for teens, and then one that is for healing from abusive relationships. So those could be some great options, especially for gaining support and more knowledge about the topic.
Great. Well, I think I had all of those resources, except for the Texas Advocacy Project, put up on the screen. One other that I found for educators is the CDC's Dating Matters, and they have an introductory video for educators. And I just thought it might be really helpful if you're a teacher or an adult that's dealing with teens to have a good sense of teen dating violence as well. So those are all great resources. And I think that's pretty much covers everything we have. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Sarah?
No, that's it. I'm so glad that we are all talking about this more because it's a really important issue. And I think that, talking about it and learning about it is the first step to eradicating teen dating violence. So thank you
Well,
for having me.
well, thank you for being the very first person on here. So I appreciate your willingness to jump in and talk about this important topic. And we should be back next week, Tuesday at noon, on Facebook Live. And we'll have a new topic next week. So thanks so much, Sarah. You have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm.